Raise your right hand and repeat after me. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give to this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Let the record show the nominees have taken the oath. Now the nominees will have an opportunity to recognize their family and friends and give an opening statement in order. Judge Gleason, starting with you, I welcome you to recognize any family members or friends you have with you today and then offer an opening statement.
Thank you, Senator Coons. First, I'd like to thank the senators for having me here today to attend this hearing. I will also press my microphone button and repeat that. I'd like to thank you both for having me here today to attend this hearing, and I'd like to thank Senator Murkowski, Senator Begich for their very kind words that they had on behalf of me, and I certainly thank the President for the honor of this nomination. My parents, Peter and Vera Gleason, are, I know, watching the webcast. They're in upstate New York and we're unable to travel here today, but I certainly thank them for all of the support that they've given me. And my sister Pat is with them, and my other sister and brothers are watching throughout the country. My daughter Chloe traveled with me here. She's a college senior, came from Alaska with me earlier this week. She's a government major, so this has been quite a great experience for her. My son David signed up months ago to be a camp counselor in San Diego at a tennis camp this month, so he's not here, but one of his jobs is planning the evening activities, and he said the webcast will feature prominently on the camp program tonight. My niece, Kristen Larson, is here in the courtroom, and family friend Molly Quinn are here as well. I know I have friends and colleagues in Alaska that are watching, and I certainly appreciate their support, and in particular, the support of my two office teammates, my administrative assistant, Ann, and my law clerk, Lindsay. So I don't have an opening statement, but I certainly look forward to answering any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Judge Gleason. Judge Rogers.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to first thank Senator Hatch, Ranking Member Grassley, and Chairman Leahy for their leadership in holding these hearings. My warm thanks to Senator Feinstein. Her enthusiastic support of my nomination has been incredible and really is deeply appreciated. I also thank Senator Boxer for her support and the President for the confidence that he has shown in me by this nomination. I'm here with a number of family members. Start with my husband of 23 years, Matt Rogers. As Senator Feinstein mentioned, we are here with our three children, Christopher, who's 16 and aspires to be an engineer, Maria, who is 12, she loves math and volleyball, and Joshua, who's 10. He wants to be a professional soccer player, is very happy with the women's win today, and a chef. I'm also here joined by my mother, Bertha Mayorga, who traveled from Texas, and my three sisters who also traveled from Texas, Lisa Reyes, Laura DeBoard, and Cynthia Rett, who's also here with her husband, Eric. Unfortunately, my brother, Rene Gonzalez, could not be with us, nor could my late father, G.B. Gonzalez. I know he would have been proud to witness these hearings, and he certainly was an inspiration to me. I do not have a formal statement. I do want to recognize and acknowledge the constitutional importance of these proceedings, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Judge Rogers. Mr. Andrews.
Thank you, Senator and Mr. Chairman. First, I do want to thank you and Senator Hatch and Senator Franken for being here for these hearings and for holding them. I very much want to thank Senator Carper and, again, Mr. Chairman, you for your kind remarks. I'm very honored that the President nominated me for this position, and I want to thank him. As has been mentioned by Senator Carper, my wife, Kathy Langto, is here. To whom I've been married 23 years. Seems like a lucky number here. And my children, Peter Andrews and Amy Andrews. I want to acknowledge my father, Peter Andrews, who's watching by webcast in Wilmington, Delaware. Kathy's mother, who's very special to me, Claire Langto, who's watching by webcast in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. I want to mention my sister, Patricia Andrews, and her husband, Michael Gray, who's from Minneapolis. And I wish Senator Franken was still here because, believe it or not, they are actually on an airplane to Bemidji, Minnesota. I want to thank them. I also want to acknowledge two friends of mine, Adam Safwat and Rudy Contreras, who are present, and I thank them for their support. I look forward to answering whatever questions the committee has.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. And last but certainly not least, Judge Scovdell.
Thank you, Senator Coons and Senator Hatch, and for the committee for holding this hearing today. I'm humbled and deeply honored by President Obama's nomination, and given the significance of this position and the quality of the individuals that were recommended for it. I'm also appreciative to Governor Friedenthal, who deemed me worthy of consideration, and to Senators Enzi and Barrasso for their kind words and introduction and support in this process. I want to recognize my best decision I ever made, my wife, Sydney Scavdall, seated behind me, of 20 years, come August 17th. My daughter, Caitlin Scavdall, the greatest blessing I've had. My father, John Scavdall, is here today. My mother is back in Nebraska watching the dogs. And my sister, Sean Nick, and her husband, Brad, and my nieces and nephews in Fremont, Nebraska. My friend and colleague, Judge Forgy from Wyoming, was able to join us today. I appreciate him being here. Mr. Ben Hebner, family friend, as well as Mr. and Mrs. Neff, family friends. I am also wanting to say hello to the staff and colleagues and friends, mentors back in Wyoming who might be watching by webcam and who, without their support, I would not be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. And thank you to everybody for introducing your families to us and for your time and attention here. I'd first like to invite each of you in order, if I might, beginning with Mr. Andrews and just proceeding down the panel, to just describe your judicial philosophy, what you see as the appropriate role of the federal district court judge, and how in particular you approach the use of precedent in your judicial duties, should you be confirmed.
Yes, Senator. In terms of judicial philosophy, it seems to me the two most important things for a federal district judge, and things that if I were confirmed I would attempt to do, is to actively manage the caseload so that it comes to some resolution. And in terms of the things that I would decide, to show restraint, not to decide things that don't need to be decided. In terms of precedent, the United States Supreme Court and the Third Circuit are binding precedent on a district judge in the District of Delaware, and I would follow their precedents.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Judge Rogers.
Thank you, Senator Coons. Quite simply, I think it is my utmost responsibility to fairly adjudicate any and all matters that come before me for all litigants, no matter their station, and to do so in a manner that is impartial and that is done without sympathy, bias, or prejudice. It is my responsibility to follow the law, to follow the statutes, the plain meaning of the statutes, and I am bound by all of the decisions of the Supreme Court and the circuit in which I sit.
Thank you, Judge. Judge Gleason.
Thank you. My philosophy is similar. I see three parts to the role of a judge. First, I see the role of the judge to determine the facts and issues that are at dispute in the case, and do so in a manner that is respectful of the views of each of the parties that are participating in the case. Second, I see the role of the judge to determine what is the applicable law, and their precedent of the higher courts is the guiding factor in determining that rule of law and applying it to the case before me. And third, I see the role of the judge in explaining the decision that has been reached, and in explaining it to the parties in a way that they understand what the rule of law is, and hopefully leaves them with a sense that their position has been heard and understood in the course of reaching the decision.
Thank you. I think it's the first time I've heard someone articulate that last particular point, which I think is helpful. Judge Scovdell.
Thank you, Senator. My philosophy has always been with litigants before me and people is to treat them as I would want to be treated if I were standing in the well of the court. I believe it's important to listen carefully, to be extremely patient with the process, and exercise humility and understanding in the issues that are presented and make those decisions carefully and wisely.
Thank you, Judge. I'd be interested if you next take up the question of sort of in particular, what's the role of the court in interpreting those laws that are written and adopted by elected bodies, whether state legislatures or the federal Congress? Mr. Andrews.
Yes, Senator. In terms of statutes or statute-like law, the role of the court is to first to look to the statute and when the meaning is plain to enforce that. When there's ambiguity, then the judge has to look at secondary other sources, which may be precedent, which, while not directly on point, shows reasoning that's analogous and should be followed, legislative intent to the extent that it can be determined, and any other relevant information that might be brought to the court's attention.
Judge Rogers, anything you'd like to add to that view of?
I think he did a terrific job, but I would add, after I've agreed with everything that my colleague to the left here said, I would add that at times if I found that there is no controlling precedent in my district, I will look to other similar situations, perhaps in the federal courts or other state courts where there are similar situations, and use those also as a means of trying to bring about a reasoned analysis to whatever the specific dispute is before me, and then to, as narrowly as possible, adjudicate it on that basis.
Judge Gleason.
I'm not sure I have a whole lot more to add. I agree with the statements of both of my colleagues to my left here, and certainly agree that the starting point in statutory interpretation is the express language of the statute.
Judge Scovdell.
I don't think I could add anything further. I would adopt those opinions expressed by my colleagues.
Thank you. I see my time's expired. We're doing 5-minute rounds. I'd like to welcome Senator Grassley. Grateful for his joining us. Senator Hatch.
Well, I'll defer to Senator Grassley, and thank you very much. I have questions right now for Judge Gleason. In 1985, while working in private practice, you wrote a report for the Alaska Women's Commission entitled, quote, "A Review of the Alaska Statutes for Sex Discrimination," end of quote. The goal of the report was to identify all potential sexual discrimination in Alaska statutes, regardless of how a court would decide the constitutionality of a given provision. Your recommendations and findings were far-ranging and I think controversial. I want to ask you about some items. You stated, quote, "The constitutional guarantee of equal rights and protections and the right to privacy present a strong argument in support of decriminalization of prostitution," end of quote. I want to give you a chance to explain the statement, but more important to me, do you support the decriminalization or legalization of prostitution today?
Thank you for the question, Senator Grassley. I was the coordinator of that report back in 1985, which was my first year as a practicing attorney, and I again read that report just a couple of months ago when I was putting together my response to the Senate Judiciary questionnaire. My role in the project, it was, as you've indicated, of course, a project put together by the Women's Commission. I was the legal coordinator, and that's indicated in the report, meaning I put together a compilation of opinions by a number of volunteer attorneys and state employees with regard to the various issues presented. Frankly, sitting here today, I I don't recall what portions of the report I personally authored and what were the work of volunteer attorneys. So it was more of a synthesis role that I played at that point in time. My views today with regard to the question that you've posed, I really have not given any reflection on that. I do feel that there are issues in our society with regard to it's essentially a legislative prerogative is how I would see it, and if there were a law one way or the other, it would be my obligation to enforce that law.
Okay. You have stated that veterans benefits have, quote, gone too far, end of quote. Specifically, you said that veterans benefits have been extended beyond their original purpose of readjusting retired service members to civilian life and therefore should be curtailed. You also stated that, quote, to offer lifetime rewards solely to those individuals who have served their country in the armed forces works to the detriment of women as a class, end of quote. The United States is currently involved in numerous conflicts around the world, putting hundreds of thousands of Americans, both men and women, in danger every day. Number one, do you still hold the views that veterans benefits should be curtailed or that such benefits work to the detriment of women as a class?
No, I do not. But I have to stress again, Senator Grassley, that my role in that report was as a coordinator, was to synthesize the work of a number of people. And so I know the report, because I've read it very recently, as I indicated for the first time, presented a number of different ways in which the legislature could address what was, at that point in time, gender discrimination in Alaska statutes. And as I recall, there were alternative recommendations, but my work was to synthesize other individuals' writings. And that's why I was the legal coordinator of that project.
Okay. Second question along the same line, do you believe that men and women who serve in the armed forces today should be denied access to veterans benefits merely because there are fewer women than men who serve in the armed services?
No.
Okay. In your 85 report, you stated that Alaska's restrictions on abortion were unconstitutional. In your view, may a state impose any restrictions on abortions, and if so, what restrictions might be permissible?
Well, the report did discuss, as I recall, the status of the United States Supreme Court precedent at that point in time, and whether made a recommendation that the current Alaska statute in place at that point in time did not conform with the directives of the United States Supreme Court. In my role as a judge, I could be called upon to address issues in the future, but primarily my role would be to enforce the existing law of the land as enunciated by the United States Supreme Court.
Okay. When discussing the pervasiveness of sexual discrimination in your state, you also alluded to the fact that you would be in favor of state-run, state-sponsored health insurance plans, given that a number of states have alleged the unconstitutionality of federal Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act's mandate for individuals to purchase state-sponsored health insurance. Should the committee assume that you would be in favor of such a plan if the case ever reached the district court?
I would hope the committee would make no assumption about how I would rule on any issue that might come before me.
In your record, both in private practice and as an Alaska State Court judge, suggests that you have not so much experience with federal law. As you know, federal district court judges must preside over a wide range of civil and criminal law cases. Would you please describe your experience with federal civil litigation?
Thank you, Senator Grassley, for the question. I will readily acknowledge that the bulk of the work I've done involves state law, and yet in the course of being a state court judge for 10 years, I have certainly encountered federal legal issues in the context of, I know I've had cases involving transportation law, I know I've had cases involving the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, issues to some extent revolving around federal constitutional law, although oftentimes they're more focused on state constitutional law, but issues with regard to federal constitutional law have arisen as well, and I've had some rather obscure federal regulation cases from time to time, I have to say, that just seem to work their way into state court.
And I'm down to 2 final questions, and I don't think they're difficult. What is your plan to become proficient in federal criminal law and procedure?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I do realize that the area where I would have a steeper learning curve is in criminal law. I will point out, however, that I have had criminal law experience as a trial court judge. I've done a first-degree murder trial where I was affirmed on appeal, and I've done several other criminal trials and post-conviction relief proceedings. But I do recognize federal law has different proceedings and different procedures that I would need to learn. I would plan to do the same that I do now when I'm confronted with a new area of law, and that is to read the applicable law, observe other court proceedings, talk to my colleagues, go to the administrative office, get the materials, the bench books that are available, and review carefully the applicable law and facts of each case so that when I walked into the courtroom for a litigant, each side would know that I was fully prepared and fully understood the law and ready to make a decision in their case.
And my last question is, if you could give us, of all the decisions you've had to make, what you would consider the most difficult decision you had to make sitting as a state court judge?
It's an interesting question, and thank you for it. And I've thought about that question to some extent because I've heard it posed to other nominees. I find the job of being a trial court judge to be incredibly rewarding and immensely challenging, and I don't see that the work of making decisions to be a particularly, it's not the difficulty is what I strive for, and the same in cases where it's hard to learn the facts. But where I did feel there was a particularly difficult case that I had was a case that involved many allegations of child abuse by foster parents of foster children, and the difficulty of the case was in the selection of the jury, because the hardship for the jurors in being questioned about the case and their ability to serve brought up for so many of them the difficulties that they had in their own lives. And I thought that was a very difficult case to preside over because of the impact it had on individuals that were simply there to do their civic duty.
I thank you very much, and I thank my colleagues for letting me go first and having a little extra time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. Senator Hatch.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Gleason, you did admit in your answers to questions, and here's what you said. In 1985, I wrote a report for the Alaska Women's Commission, which is entitled, quote, "A Review of the Alaska Statutes for Sex Discrimination," unquote. So I think the record should show that. And
I'm sorry. It certainly, I was the legal coordinator of the report, I believe.
Well, then you didn't, you say here, I wrote a report. Did you just coordinate it and write what others had given you, or?
And here again, I am.
I'm not meaning to hold.
No. I have trouble recalling what I did 25 years ago, my first year of practice. I will be.
Well, what kind of a person are you that you can't recall 25 years ago?
Thank you, Senator. It gets more challenging.
Last week sometimes.
But I will say, I recall receiving large amounts of materials from attorneys, and I did have my office type it up. Okay. The extent to which I actually wrote things versus I wrote what other people contributed. Sitting here today, I simply cannot point to what I can say I wrote. The one thing I do recall having written most of in that was in the area of insurance law, because I remember reading the insurance law code for the very first time as a new lawyer and thinking, this has some very obscure provisions.
As far as I'm concerned, that's fine. You found to be discriminatory insurance company policies that correlate sex and risk. You wrote that, and let me give you the quote.
Certainly, go ahead.
A state-administered group insurance plan for individuals or otherwise without access to group health insurance plans should be explored, unquote. Is that still your opinion?
I see that as a prerogative of the legislature, and the purpose of the report was to give suggested alternative recommendations to the legislature.
Okay. Judge Govdell, I want to know what position you played on the football team.
Senator, I primarily occupied the bench, but I played under the 3rd down 3 or 30 rule as a wide receiver, and I would go in on 3rd down and 3, or if we were 30 points ahead or behind, which sometimes that was with BYU and the University of Utah, I would get to go in.
Now, you better be careful talking about BYU and the University of Utah, is all I can say. Did you, you were a state court judge until your recent appointment as a federal magistrate. That's great experience. Let me ask you just one question I explored with Justice Kristen. What difference do you see in the power or discretion of state and federal judges, especially when it comes to interpreting the Constitution or statutes?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. I see there are some states that in Wyoming there's implied common law, and there's some rules of law with respect to whether or not statutes have been enacted that adopt or that eviscerate the common law. I don't think that applies in the federal situation, and candidly I would have to bone up on that issue. But certainly the cornerstone is precedent, and I'd be bound by that, and giving plain meaning to the words of the Congress, and narrowly interpreting, and there is a presumption of constitutionality that attaches to a statute.
Sure. Now, you've had your very own doctor say that you've had various orthopedic problems. Is that going to impair your ability to be a judge?
No, Senator. Thankfully, I do not believe it would. If I was fortunate enough to be confirmed, I'm able to walk, and my knee is a little stiff on occasion, but modern medicine has assisted that, so I can still play basketball on occasion.
I want to know if Barassa was really that good of a doctor. That's what I want to know.
I'm able to get in here without a wheelchair.
Well, then that's something to be said. Mr. Andrews, you've called for lessening criminal penalties for drug possession and argued that suspending the driver's license for that crime is counterproductive. Now, do you agree that judges, unlike prosecutors or certainly legislators, should not participate in such policy debates, but should simply enforce the laws enacted by the legislature?
Yes, Senator.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you've also criticized mandatory sentences. Now, if confirmed, what deference will you give to the federal sentencing guidelines?
Senator, I'm not sure when you say I've criticized mandatory sentences. I think that there may be particular statutes where the committee that I was on thought that the mandatory sentence in that particular case wasn't the right thing, but I haven't criticized them as a general proposition. In regards to the sentencing guidelines, for federal sentencing, they're certainly the starting point for any sentence, and they're entitled to some deference.
Yeah, join the crowd. I think a lot of us have concerns, and I was one of those who helped put those mandatory guidelines into effect. So I still have concerns about them, to be honest with you. Judge Rogers, congratulations. You certainly all of you have had tremendous accolades from your fellow senators from your states. I think that's a great tribute to each one of you. But Judge Rogers, in a 1992 article published in the La Raza Law Journal, you wrote that, quote, "Power is not going to be given to us, it's got to be taken," unquote. Now, that can certainly mean different things, including a call to be involved in the political process. Do you believe that judges should be engaged in helping or empowering certain groups, or must judges decide cases objectively based on the law?
Judges must, Senator, decide cases objectively on the law. That article really was about political participation in our representative democracy, which I believe is important for all citizens. It was written 20 years ago, as you indicated. But a role of a judge and a role of politicians or those in the political branch are very different.
Are you saying that when you're younger, you do make some statements that you might have to eat later on in life?
I think when all of us are younger, we make certain statements that we may think about differently at different times in our lives.
That's great. Now, you've been on the state court bench just a few years. if I remember correctly from your questionnaire, 95%, am I right about this? 95% of your private practice was in state court, and 99% of it was civil rather than criminal.
Correct. Most of my experience on this prior to becoming a judge was civil.
Now, I, for one, don't think that disqualifies you at all. What I'm concerned about more than anything else with judges is integrity, capacity, the ability to read the law and understand it, the ability to interpret the laws, and to live within certain judicial constraints. I think all four of you have done an excellent job here today, and I just want to tell you that I intend to support each and every one of you and hope that you'll make terrific judges on the bench. As somebody who did practice extensively both in civil litigation but also in federal litigation, I have nothing but respect for federal judges. And we want to have the best people we can possibly get, and I certainly think the four of you will make excellent judges on the bench. Just be fair, be honest, be straightforward, and be tough. Sometimes it's important to be tough with attorneys and let them know who's in charge. But I just am very appreciative that you're willing to do this. We know that many of you can make a lot more money in private practice than you do as a federal judge, but there's very few things that are as satisfying or as important in this country and in our constitutional way of law than being a federal judge. And I commend each of you for being willing to do this, and I commend the President for setting your names up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if you forgive me, I'm going to have to leave.
Thank you, Senator Hatch. There being no further questions from this panel today, I will thank the nominees and their families. Thank the nominees, as Senator Hatch and other members of this panel mentioned, for their willingness to serve the public. And we will hold the record open for a week for any members of the committee who wish to submit additional questions. I want to congratulate all four of you on your nominations. We're truly grateful that you've answered the call to federal service and believe all four of you to be highly qualified to serve in the federal bench. And I'm hopeful that the full body of the Senate will take up the consideration of your nominations promptly. We stand in recess.